Whenever we think about action-adventure genre, specifically the games that try to capture the historical, globe-trotting feel, our minds immediately go to the big three: Tomb Raider, Uncharted, and Indiana Jones. They are the juggernauts of the space, but if you look at their DNA, the studios behind them actually took completely different approaches to get there. To really understand the depths of these designs, you have to push them to the limit. For me, that meant playing on the hardest setting. That's where the cinematic polish falls away, and you see how the systems actually hold up under pressure. And of course, how you do as well. Now look, it's a fair comparison, because on paper they all speak the same language. They all have combat, they all have platforming, and they all rely on puzzles and exploration. But the priority is what changes everything. For Crystal Dynamics, survival was the most important thing. For Naughty Dog, it was about uncovering the truth through heavy mix of story and combat. And for Indie, the weight was clearly focused on puzzles and exploration. So of course, it's not about which game is better or worse. It's about how different approaches change our experience as players. And of course, which one stayed with me once the credits rolled. Before starting this deep dive, I need to make one thing very clear. I played 6 games overall in this genre. One Indiana Jones, the one that came recently, a Tomb Raider survival trilogy, and the recent Uncharted games that were released on PC, Uncharted 4 and The Lost Legacy. So let's start with Onboarding and see how these games teach you to play. Uncharted is all about the flow. You're climbing and shooting in the middle of a huge action scene. The game guides you so perfectly that you're barely noticing that you're being taught. It's built to keep you moving like a movie star. Tomb Raider is different. It puts you in a desperate situation immediately. If you're trapped or hurt, you have to learn the controls and the survival mechanics right away, because you won't last long otherwise. It's a crash course in staying alive. The Great Circle, on the other hand, doesn't try to hide that it's a game. It hands you a camera and a journal and expects you to actually look at the surroundings to find your way. It's a much more hands-on approach to being an archaeologist.
You can talk to me.
And this takes us to the next session, which is world interaction. Once the world opens up, you see a difference in how you interact with your surroundings. In Uncharted 4 and The Lost Legacy, the world is beautiful but very limited. You can't really touch anything unless it's a weapon or a specific crate you need to move. You follow the yellow paint on ledges that tell you exactly where to go. It's a guided experience that keeps you on a set path. Tomb Raider treats the environment as a resource. You're constantly interacting with the bushes for wood, scavenging for parts, or using mud to hide from enemies. You have to harvest the wool to keep your gear ready for the next fight. The Great Circle finds the middle ground. It still uses some visual cues to show you where to climb so that you don't get lost. But the interaction is much more free. You can pick up almost any object, a bottle, a shovel, or a hammer, and use it as a tool or a weapon. One game is guided tour, one is about survival, and one gives you a full toolkit right away. And this brings us to the actual history of these games. In Uncharted, the history is just a reason for the plot to happen. You aren't really there to study the ruins. You're there to find the treasure and stop the villains. The locations are just pretty backgrounds for the action. Tomb Raider connects the history to survival. You learn about ancient myths, but the puzzles and environments are built around them. You have to understand the why of Tomb just to get out of it alive. Indiana Jones makes the history the main point. The game expects you to pay attention. You use your camera and journal to document what you find and piece the story together yourself. It makes you feel like a researcher instead of a soldier in a hat. And what about combat? How do these systems hold up when you're playing on crushing or deadly obsession settings? In Uncharted, the combat is meant to look cool. But when you're dying in 2 hits, the shooting can feel a bit loose and frustrating. You realize the mechanics were designed for cinematic experience, not a high precision shooter. Indie focuses on physical heavy brawling. Since it's meant to feel grounded, the combat doesn't feel broken on high difficulty. It just feels like a desperate, messy fight. In Tomb Raider, high difficulty is where the systems shine. You have to be an efficient hunter. Using the environment, stealth, and your bow isn't just a choice. It's the only way to survive. The game is at its best when it is at its hardest. Now we cannot talk about archaeology-based games without talking about the puzzles. This is where you see if the studio actually wants you to think or if they just want you to slow down for a second. In Uncharted, the puzzles are usually set pieces. They look incredible, massive gears, giant statues, but the logic is usually pretty surface level. If you stand still for too long, the game basically gives you the answer. It's a puzzle designed to make you feel smart without actually letting you get stuck.
I think that's it.
Tomb Raider uses physics as the puzzle.
Yes, that'll hold.
It's less about ancient riddles and more about weight, counterweights, and using your gear. Like the rope arrows to manipulate the environment. On Deadly Obsession, these tombs are a highlight of the game because they require actual spatial awareness. But the Great Circle takes completely different approach. The puzzles here aren't just roadblocks. They are the core of the experience. You have to actually read your journal, look at the photos you have taken, and piece together clues. It's the only one that feels like a genuine mystery you have to solve. And then moving forward, how these characters move through the world changes how you explore it. Uncharted 4 perfected the magnetism of climbing. Nathan Drake practically leaps towards ledges. It's fast, it's fluid, and it's meant to look amazing on the screen. It's about the spectacle of the movement. Tomb Raider is an interesting one. Even though the game is built around survival, Lara can actually feel a bit floaty. There's a weightlessness to her jumps and snaps that makes the movement feel less grounded than the atmosphere suggests. It's fast, but you don't always feel the gravity of the situation when you're platforming. Then you have the Great Circle. This is where you feel the weight. Because it's first person, you feel every heavy step Indy takes. Using the whip isn't a floaty animation. It's a tactile tool that feels like it has actual tension and mass. It trades that third-person cinematic glide for a sense of actually being in those heavy boots. When you are playing on the hardest settings, the enemy AI is the main obstacle between you and the next discovery. In Uncharted, the AI is built for pressure. They'll flesh you out with grenades and flank you constantly. It's effective, but it's scripted to keep the action moving. Stealth here is usually just a way to thin the numbers before the inevitable shootout starts. Tomb Raider is where the stealth actually feels like a functioning system, because you can use the environment, hiding in the bushes or using mud. The AI feels like it's actually being hunted. In Shadow, they have investigation states that feel fair. When you mess up on Deadly Obsession, it usually feels like your fault, not a cheap trick. Then we have the Great Circle. Now the AI here is definitely most basic of the three. They don't have the same aggressive search and destroy logic you see in Naughty Dog games, but in a way, it fits the student of history vibe. The game isn't trying to be a tactical shooter. It's giving you enough breathing room to use your tools and solve the environment without being hunted 24/7. It's less about smart enemies and more about being another puzzle piece for you to move around. So after pushing the score system to the limit, what's the actual result of the audit? It comes down to where each studio truly excelled. Uncharted decided that flow and story were the absolute priority. Naughty Dog created the most polished, linear, and guided experience possible. It is targeted perfectly to make you feel like a star of the movie. While it might feel on rails compared to the others, it is undeniably the king of narrative-driven experience. Tomb Raider, in my opinion, owns the movement and platforming. Even with the floaty feel, the variety in how you navigate is just better. Between the grappling and environmental puzzles, it's a mechanically dense game where the platforming itself is the challenge. And The Great Circle had the most enjoyable and well thought out combat. It doesn't just rely on being a shooter, it gives you massive variety of tools that make every fight feel fresh and reactive. It trades away the snappy pace for a heavy tactile presence that subjectively was the most rewarding experience for me. In the end, it's not about which architecture is better, it's about which set of priorities you value as a player. The fundamentals that stay with you are the ones that matched your own style. And this deep dive was never about picking a definitive winner for everyone. It was about stripping away the graphics to see how these games actually function when you're playing the main story only on the hardest settings.
Okay.
For me, seeing these three different studios took the same archaeology DNA and built three completely different fundamentals was the real highlight. Thanks for sticking through the deep dive. If you have played these games on the higher difficulties, I'd love to hear if your experience with the combat or traversal matched mine. I'll see you in the next audit.